Hi, I'm Jonathan Block. In this video, I'm just going to use GarageBand on the iPad to make some ambient music. The signal chain is just a 2024 iPad Pro 11-inch. I'm using GarageBand, which comes on every Apple device. I'm not going to be using any extra effects or instruments, no AUV3s or anything like that. I'm also not going to be recording in GarageBand in real time. I'm going to be using it more as a live performance tool, and that's not the easiest thing to do in the world, and I'll get into that. So I just have screen recording going on here, and then for the jam, it'll be the same thing. So I have a number of tracks, some of them which I've already pre-recorded some parts, and I have one instrument that I'm going to be doing different solos over, and let's start right at the top. So I've got a Roland drum machine, CR-78, and let's open this up here so that kind of hear what I came up with. So I have 4 or 5 different patterns that I created. This is just the first one. You can hear there's a lot of reverb there, but once other instruments are going, that's just going to disappear. Let's turn that off. Then the next track, let me open this up, is an ARP. So this is Alchemy is the synth tool within GarageBand, and it's not really the most tweakable. As you can see here, you do have some knobs and there are some things you can change, and then you can save it as your own patch. They also have kind of variations right in here, but we'll be using just this as a arpeggiator. And as you can see, I'm not going to be using any external keyboard. I'm just going to be using the keyboard that's on the iPad. Let's keep going here. We've got, I'm calling this a woodwind pad. It's just got that kind of woody, hollow sound. That's one pad. We have a second pad. This is called hollow pad. You see those blue dots there? That means that as you move, you can kind of use the key itself. Kind of hear the sound change. Pretty cool. I mean, that's a great sound. And I really only did a little bit of tweaking to get that there. Then we have the leads that I'll be using, or the patch for the leads. I call this albedo lead only because it reminds me of Vangelis. Actually, that's the organ. I'm going to use 3 sounds here. This is the Vangelis-y one. And then a brighter version. And then a filtered version. And then the organ. I'll be using that right at the end. And finally, we have a Moog type bass. Let's get into that. There you go. So what I'll be doing here, if you see, I've got I have 32 bars of blank space here, because what I'm going to do to start it is essentially go into this woodwind pad. Now using this as a live performance tool, as you can tell, once I get into the synth to actually play it, it's taking over the whole screen. In a sense, you can use GarageBand as a performance tool, but you can't really multitask, so I can play that, but then I have to go back in order to play something else. So how I'm going to start the jam is I'm just going to press play, and then I'm going to do some pads. And then, I'm not going to sit here for the 32 bars. Let's get close to it. Get back in there. So I will have played the pad, and then the recording part will take over here. And then I'll move on to the next instrument, which is this hollow pad. And I'll do some pad type noises on here until the pre-recorded kind of loop that I created for this sound comes up. All right. And then once that comes up, again, I'm kind of going through this a little quick. Then we'll get into the ARP, which I already played. So as that's going, let me get over here where the drum comes in. Everything else will get picked up the next round. And then really at this point, it's just, there's changes to the patterns, changes to all the pre-recorded kind of loops and pads. And then over here, just getting here, there's that Moog type bass. And then at this point, I would be going into that lead. Of course, I'm still on the organ again. Not the easiest to play with your fingers and not using an external keyboard, but again, you really can't get more portable than this. And then I will change depending on what's going on. Things will fall out as the piece goes on. Then we'll get to the end, or towards the end, which is when the drums stop. Let me get to that part. Last measure of the drums. And that's when I'll use the organ sound. Drums. So this is just the pads and the ARP going. That's the setup. That's pretty much what I'm going to do for the jam. Let me go to a different place. As you can tell, the background here, I'm just experimenting with different areas to do the recording. I mean, with the iPad, you can go and sit anywhere. So, but very difficult just to sit in a chair without any support for the iPad itself. So I'll bring this over to a table and we'll do some recording over there. So clearly GarageBand is really powerful. I just showed a few of the different patches I created using the Alchemy synth. No loops, nothing like that. Also, the drum machine within GarageBand now has definitely evolved over the years. So you do get that XOX interface that I showed at the beginning, so you can create a bunch of different patterns and just then rearrange them. The biggest downside to GarageBand as a performance tool is that, just like I've shown in the past, when you hit the record button and you really can't change anything, it's almost the same thing here. You pick the patch or the synth that you want to play live, and you don't really have access to anything else other than that synth. I mean, it could be a lot worse, but you can't be, it's very difficult to fade things in, fade things out, mute them. So I really don't recommend using it as a performance tool. I mean, AUM or one of the other more live DAWs are definitely more applicable to changing things on the fly. But comes on every iPad, GarageBand comes on every device, and it's still a powerful application, if for nothing else than just getting down some ideas quickly. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.